A campaign of lies can hide anything, and with the magic of disinformation, mysterious deaths can be quickly brushed off as suicides.
Victor Bout is the most famous arms dealer in the world. This fact is greatly facilitated by the film Lord of War.
Open the champagne, pop the cork. The Senate Democrat leader and the Republican leader are on their way to Kiev. They've got $60 billion they're bringing.
He had men with guns drawn come into his house at dawn.
Yes, exactly. You had the FBI burst into your house, they take all your computers, they arrest you.
Bout really did do business with the most cruel and bloody people on earth.
First, I went to the House Intelligence Committee, and the staff member that I personally knew there, we were all trying to work internally in the government over these years, trying to get them to come around to being constitutionally acceptable.
Now, they didn't have much time, really no time and no money to do anything about our border.
And there's so many stories now that just don't add up.
We naively kept thinking that could happen, and it never did.
He worked with Al-Qaeda and with the Taliban, ran military equipment for the Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi.
We're being invaded.
And you'll never know who was really behind it or why, as long as the powers that be push a great narrative.
They decided to raid us to keep us quiet, threaten us, In my case, they came in with guns drawn. I don't know why they did that, but they did.
Supplied weapons to probably all African countries where civil wars were fought.
A literal invasion's coming across our border. 800,000 people came illegally in the last month.
Infiltrated the highest ranks of every sector of power.
Thomas Drake, who was an executive at the top of the U.S. intelligence community, now works at an Apple store.
You're either growing or dying, so we grew.
For more than 150 years, oil and gas has played a critical role in our society.
Why are there no ships heading to the United States?
It was just this really defining moment of these two men.
It was clear who had the leverage.
Improving human lives, raising standards of living, and enabling unprecedented economic growth.
The ship's over 16,000 TEU 20-foot equivalent unit. None of them are heading to and from the United States.
And all they had time to do in the Senate was get the money, get the cash pallets, load the planes, get the champagne ready, and fly to Kiev.
He was into law enforcement, art, Wall Street, Silicon Valley, big business, real estate, philanthropy, media, academics, and banking.
People died because of people like him, and he was dubbed the Merchant of Death.
And meanwhile, each day, between 5,000 to 10,000 people come across the border illegally.
In American law enforcement circles, Bout was second only to Osama bin Laden.
The epic story of our failure to tackle climate change.
The whole world is heating up.
And the role of the fossil fuel industry.
Whatever political party you identify with, you are welcome here.
He said very specifically, depending on the questions you ask Putin, you could be arrested or not.
Whatever color, culture, or creed you identify with, you are welcome here.
And I said, listen to what you're saying. You're saying the U.S. government has, control over my questions and they'll arrest me if I ask the wrong question?
If you are vaccinated or unvaccinated, you are welcome here.
How are we better than Putin if that's true?
Now look around. Look around at these faces in this crowd. Take a good look around. This is America the Beautiful.
Killing Navalny during the Munich Security Conference in the middle of a debate over $60 billion in Ukraine funding?
Nearly 800,000 people in 2 months is an emergency.
And it's worth fighting for. You are worth fighting for.
Why wouldn't we, after having 750,000 people come in illegally, close down the illegal crossings immediately?
Your children are worth fighting for. Our freedom is worth fighting for.
What do you do when your industry can no longer exist without creating catastrophes worldwide?
Lewis's corporate jet was waiting at the Charlotte airport.
Texas and 30-some-odd Republican governors have said enough's enough. They put cargo containers and razor wire on the border to say no more illegal crossings.
I was raised in California by a single mom who did her best to care for 4 children on her own. As a child of the welfare state, I witnessed firsthand what happens to the psyche and spirit of those who become dependent on government assistance. My brother was killed by a drug called AZT. Hundreds of thousands of innocent people died as a result of that prescribed poison.
It is connected to entire networks of power and influence.
The pusher of AZT was none other than Dr. Anthony Fauci.
A web of elites who operate under the principle that rules are for other people.
The reason that only one drug has been made available, AZT, because it's the only drug that has been shown to be safe and effective.
Well, it's certainly nice to know that the future looks bright.
"30 years later, there he was again. Same script, same actors, same performance.
These are safe and effective products.
Knowing what that man had done in the 80s and 90s, I couldn't believe he was still in a position of such power.
The entire agency of government is engaged in a conspiracy to deceive the public about the reality that we are right now. Working in concert across agencies to carry out a program that is in violation not only of law but the Constitution.
As the world descended into synchronized tyranny, I began to ask myself, how did they get everyone to go along with this?
Everything freezes, and that's what causes the crisis.
The only way to win this is to have your commitment to, what you're fighting for, the good about humanity, to be total.
It has to do with not wanting 750,000 people to come across who we don't know who they are. Most of them are males of a military age, and we're doing nothing.
I began studying every moment in recorded history where masses of people devolved into a state of self-destruction.
The impacts of climate change are intensifying.
It's important to understand the past. You can't understand where you are if you don't know how you got there.
Robert Maxwell was involved in many things, but he definitely played a major role in undermining U.S. national security by selling bug software to nuclear laboratories in the United States.
Why do you think you were charged under the Espionage Act?
To send a chilling message to other whistleblowers, to others in the government, not to speak out.
Since the 1960s, Mr. Griffin has been warning the world of the communist plot to overtake America.
Do not tell truth to power.
In Russia, on the contrary, he was considered an innocent victim of American politics and almost a national hero.
Preparing for my video today, I found this graphic. It's raining planes. Russia has lost 10 warplanes in the last 10 days.
Because it's moved to this wartime economy, it's spending an absolute fortune keeping the war in Ukraine going.
Numerous international intelligence agencies, but unimaginably always managed to escape. So how did he get caught?
Ukraine downs 2 more Russian Su-34 over the past day. These 2 jets were shot down in the Mariupol and Avdiivka directions. So when was the Polish oppression of Ukraine that you're talking about? The 13th century. For MAGA supporters who want Russia to win, they're not big readers. They're not big fans of history. If something happened 800 years ago, that's not really relevant to today.
From childhood, the boy had a passion for 2 things: learning languages and the military.
Where Russia is sitting right now compared to where it was before this war started, and what the long-term implications are for the Russian economy if it continues operating in this manner.
The people of Ukraine absolutely love America. Russia is not your friend. They are not your friend. They want to fuck up all of Western civilization. That's the goal.
After serving for 2 years on the territory of the Ukrainian SSR in Zakarpattia, the USSR began to collapse, creating a mess in almost all post-Soviet countries.
There is an argument that there is a noble cause, that these people are fighting for their independence and they're fighting against aggression. All of that is true.
They love American culture. They love American culture. It's the largest country in Europe, massively resource rich. Putin can't go against NATO until he gets Ukraine. Once he gets Ukraine, he can then mobilize not only the resources and the ports and whatever people are surviving to then weaponize them against NATO.
I'm merely saying there isn't a Nazi movement in 2024. It's a way of calling people evil. Putin hates nationalism in general, which is interesting. He's got 80 whatever republics, and he's afraid of nationalist movements. He fought a war in Chechnya.
He bought fresh flowers from South Africa, which cost $2, and sent them to the Emirates and Saudi Arabia, where they allegedly cost $100.
A prime minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this house at all. Mr. Trudeau, please spare us your presence. Thank you.
The incidence of terrorism over time is actually declining relative to the last century. If you look at, for example, terrorist attacks in Western Europe, they have declined decade over decade since like the 1960s. I am not against the use of intelligence. I'm not against the existence of intelligence agencies. I'm not against surveillance. I am against mass surveillance.